Hello there. I've recently experienced the phenomenon known as COVID, and so today I wanted, for whatever reason, to talk about my experience with all that. Today is technically, I just counted the days, and I will be looking at my calendar from time to time right here. I've got it all mapped out. But it is technically day 26 from the first day that I experienced symptoms related to this, okay? So, so I still do have a cough that is lingering. I think I've heard that's pretty typical, and I've heard some other experiences, and sounds like my whole situation is a little bit typical in some ways. But for me, I'm weird, I guess, the way I process things. I will be sharing some information of how my life has changed over this whole experience because for some reason, when I get sick, there tends to be an emotional or a spiritual component to it. So I'll explain what that means in just a moment. But yeah, a little bit of background information before we get into the symptoms of this whole recent experience. So, for one, a pattern I've noticed, maybe this is a superstition, maybe it's a coincidence, but I couldn't help but notice that this recent, I was mostly sick in October 2023. It is currently November 2023. I couldn't help but notice that this sickness coincided with the eclipse season. We had two eclipses in October, and the reason why I noticed that is because I also got deathly ill in April of 2022, which was also a time, or no, I think it may have been May, but it coincided with an eclipse season then as well. That was actually worse than this one, and I didn't test for COVID, so I don't know if it was COVID or not. I didn't lose my taste or smell that time. But I was pretty much bedridden for upwards of like a week. I missed a week of work and I had a higher fever for that episode than this one. So I thought I would just kind of briefly mention that. I don't know if that's related, but I thought that was kind of interesting. For that experience, I lost, I think, like 15 pounds. My fever was upwards of, almost 104 at the worst parts. I had this fever that would go up and down throughout the day. Every night it would get really high, like 103, and then every day it would go down to like, I don't know, 101 or something. And I actually charted it out. But anyway, that's all from back in, I believe, May of 2022. So again, I don't know if that's relevant or not, but I figured I would mention that. And I thought it was weird that both happened during eclipse season. So I thought that was kind of fun, right? Okay, and then the other main piece of background information I have to give you more has to do with this year. So I've been experiencing tinnitus, or a consistent ringing in the ears, specifically my left ear, every day since July 17th. Okay, July 17th is the day that I first noticed it. It kind of crept in sneakily, and it was at a level where it didn't really bother me so much. I promise this has to do with the COVID experience because it would get a lot worse October of this year with this COVID. But anyway, every day between July 17th and October, the ringing was consistent. It was always there. I didn't really know what to do about it. It wasn't loud enough that I couldn't hear or anything like that. I could still go about my life and have pretty much the same quality of life that I could without the ringing. If I was in situations that were loud, like my work is often loud, not loud enough to damage my ears. I work in basically a grocery store, so not loud enough to damage my ears, but it was loud enough that it could kind of muffle out the ringing, and I just wouldn't really notice it. I have that kind of personality where I do focus very well. I don't have ADHD, so usually even now I still do have the ringing, but it didn't really bother me. Okay, and it actually doesn't tend to bother me now. Now I'm aware of it because I was just talking about it, but I'm usually not aware of it. But it has always been there every single day since July 17th. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, that didn't really bother me until October. So what I consider day one, the day that I first really experienced some symptoms, was October 11th. Apparently, I've got it all mapped out, like I said. And by the way, this cough is very real that I have. It's very unpredictable. To some degree, it's uncontrollable. It's a very dry, basically completely unproductive cough. Like, there is some congestion, I think, in my chest, in my airways, but little to none comes out. That's what is so kind of annoying about this cough. So anyway, October 11th. So I was working, and I did notice as well. I'll mention these different patterns that, or potential patterns, potential variables. But the week before I became sick, really multiple things happened. It got a lot colder, relatively colder in Florida where I live. And many people got sick at the same time. Some with COVID, some with just random other things, colds, flus, allergies, everything. There's the change of seasons. We finally got a break from the heat we had up until that point. So just want to mention that as well. Another thing that happened, well, two other things that happened is, where I live is very seasonal. There are many, snowbirds, we call them, who live up north for the summer, and then they come down in the winter, and many of them did come down right around that same time, right around, mid-October. So, that could be relevant as well. I don't know if they're bringing stuff in, but anyway. And then the one other thing too is that my diet was much different than it normally is the week before I got sick. And whether that has anything to do with it, I don't know, but I figured I would mention it. I was actually trying to gain weight at that time. So I was allowing myself to consume a lot more sugar than normal. I don't know if that's the best way to gain weight. That sounds probably stupid, but that's what I was doing. I was drinking a lot of half and half. Maybe that sounds gross, and I usually have a pretty low sugar diet, but that week I was allowing myself to have more sugar. So Wednesday, October 11th, I was on my lunch break, and I had just finished a soda, which I rarely have just soda like that. But that was right after I drank that, after I came back from my lunch break, that was when I started noticing, I started sneezing and yawning a lot, which is kind of weird. But for the next couple of days, I'd be sneezing a lot, yawning a lot. I wasn't sure why. And then also coming back from my lunch, I just felt generally unwell, but it was still slight enough that it didn't really interfere with my work. It didn't interfere with anything that I wanted to do. But I definitely noticed a sharp shift in how I was feeling for sure. It was very clear, October 10th, I was 100% fine. And then on the evening of October 11th, something was definitely not fine, but it wasn't bad enough to interfere with my life. Day 2, October 12th, I worked 8 hours. That was fine. I didn't call out or anything like that. But I did notice, I think I felt fine going to work, but then just afternoon, I started feeling, I actually need to correct myself. I would end up going home early from work because right around noon, I noticed a very sharp decline in my health. I started feeling the body aches, and I knew I was feverish. I didn't have a thermometer at my disposal, but I can generally tell when I'm feverish, and I'll tell you why. Because there are many other symptoms that kind of go along with having a fever, at least for me, but I think for everyone else as well. So, really intense body aches and chills. I felt much colder at work than I typically do. Not just cold, but also my body temperature regulation seemed to be off. So generally I was very cold, but there were sometimes periods where I would become very hot, but overall very cold and achy. I knew I was sick. I could feel myself getting more sick as I was working. So I would go home early. The next day I still went to work because I need to go to work. I need money. So I still went to work. It was kind of the same deal as the day before. Day 3 was a lot like day 2. I went to work. I tried to tough it out. I was there for a few hours, but the whole time I was very achy. That was the main thing. And I think at this point I was still having the sneezing and yawning for some reason was going along with the sneezing. But at this point it was really just sneezing, yawning, if you can count that as a symptom, and then the body aches, chills, fever, etc. Like I said, I didn't measure my fever at this time, but I would guess it was, I don't know, maybe like 101, not super high by any means, but definitely high enough to affect me and make me feel like I can't be out at work. Okay, so I went home early that day as well. Interesting side note. So on day 3, I told my manager that I need to, sorry, I need to go home. I'm not feeling well at all. I wasn't feeling well when I went to work, and it didn't get better at all. So I told her, I told her I was going home. She now has COVID. She has missed the last week of work at the time of my making this. So it is possible that I gave it to her somehow. I was in close proximity to her. But who knows? You can't really tell for sure where you get these things from, I don't think. Anyway, so went home early. The next day, I called out of work. I was pretty bad all day. Um, I don't tend to take medication because it doesn't usually help me. Sometimes it makes me feel worse. Um, I did take some kind of medication that day, which temporarily relieved my symptoms. But then, as soon as it faded away in the evening, right around like 5 or 6 p.m. on day 4, um, kind of just all hell broke loose. The body aches became extreme, like nothing I've experienced before. And I'm no stranger to body aches. I've had many different like flu-like symptoms in my life, really throughout my life. I have kind of this recurring sickness that I've had ever since I was around 18 or 19, and fever and body aches are a part of that. So I'm no stranger to fever or body aches, but this was on a different level. The weird thing about it was I did check my temperature around this time, and it wasn't particularly high. It was around, I believe, 101, and yet the body aches were like nothing else. And I think my highest temperature was on Saturday or Sunday, so day 4 or day 5, and I don't think I got past about maybe 102 from what I can remember. I'm sorry I didn't write that down, but from what I can remember, it's around 102. I usually start getting delusional closer to 103, and I know that it's serious, that you need to take medication to avoid that. But I didn't quite get there. I did get slightly, I do tend to get emotional when I get feverish. So I was experiencing that to some degree, definitely on Saturday. But anyway, so yeah, 5 or 6 p.m., super sharp downturn in my health. Uh, Kind of suddenly, but also gradually, my tinnitus in my left ear became dramatically worse, and I felt a huge pressure there. It was so loud that I couldn't really hear. It was way beyond anything I had experienced up to that point. Up to that point, it was just a very mild annoyance. Okay, this sucks, but I can live with it. But Saturday evening, day 4, huge pressure in my ear as well. And that combined with the body aches was one of the most painful experiences I've had in my life. I was moaning from pain. I didn't know what to do. I was looking up all these videos of how to relieve the pain. I do have reasons why, I don't have really money for for an ER visit. I know everyone says go to the doctor, go to the doctor. I don't really have money for that right now, and I don't have insurance. So, and that's my own problem. I have my own reasons for that. Don't worry about it. But anyway, so I was looking at different remedies, different ways I could cope with this pain, this huge, and because the pressure kept building, and it felt like my head was gonna explode. It just felt like it, kept building, kept feeling more and more painful, and again, the body aches at the same time as that was so painful. Definitely one of my top 10 most painful experiences that I've had. I tried all these different methods that didn't work, and I was pretty agitated. Honestly, I was really irritable and impatient from all the pain. Like the pain was just constant. Like I couldn't even really hardly think about anything other than the pain. But eventually I did find a method that worked. So you basically just cup your hand to your ear like this and then pull it away, and it doesn't exert as much pressure on your ear as you might think. It's not something super dramatic. I don't think I injured myself by any means, but it did just get enough pressure coming from my ear to eventually pop my ear, because I was trying to do this to pop my ear and that did absolutely nothing. So I'm still not sure, was there some congestion there? I'm not sure. Oh, the other thing too, around this time, my ear... Yeah, no, let me not get ahead of myself. Okay, I'm kind of remembering all this because it was still, it was a few weeks ago by now. But anyway, so I did this. It did kind of pop my ear, and that did immensely help. The pressure relieved dramatically. But what started around right at that time, I believe, was I did have some kind of, this is gonna be kind of gross, but there's a discharge coming from my ear, and it was very watery. When it first happened on Saturday night, day 4, um, it did have a very slight pinkish hue, so it's possible there may have been some blood there for sure. But it definitely wasn't, overall bloody, and it didn't even look like earwax, to be honest. It was very watery. It almost had the consistency of water, and it was mostly clear. I think if you put it on a tissue, it would have a slightly pink residue at first, and then consistently, maybe like a very slight kind of yellowish consistency. So maybe a little bit of earwax, but mostly it looked like water, which was very strange. And I still don't know what that was. I don't know anything about that. But that would start on Saturday night after I popped my ear, and it would come out, I don't know, maybe every 20 minutes or so, it would just drain a little bit. I'd have to, dab tissues on my ear. It would do that every 20 to 30 minutes throughout the whole weekend. Really fun weekend, and it would continue on for days. And what else happened? I think that was it for day 4. This was the worst day for me, easily. Very easily, this was the worst day. So yeah, worst body aches, pain, the weird ear thing, the ear pressure. Oh, and after I did pop my ear, the tinnitus did get better as well. As the pressure lessened, the tinnitus, the ringing was much louder than it had been coming up to this whole episode, this whole illness. It was definitely much louder than that, but it was at least quieter after popping my ear than it was when the pressure was there, if that makes sense. So, yeah, but definitely loud enough that it was not okay. It was something I was very concerned about. Okay. And then also, I'm not sure exactly when, but I believe Saturday, day 4, was the day where I lost my taste and my smell as well. And this was very strange because it really caught me off guard. I've heard other people describe their experience losing their taste and smell with COVID, and I just didn't realize how bizarre and unsettling it was. Honestly, I minded that more than the loss of my hearing. Although none of it was particularly great, none of it was preferable, but so basically within one day I lost the taste and the smell. Though it didn't just drop out of nowhere, it was kind of it was sort of intermittent, like some things I could taste. I couldn't tell if it was the foods I was eating. Oh, some things I can taste more than others, or is the taste and smell just like wavering and kind of coming in and out, so to speak. And I think it was sort of both, a combination. But through Saturday, it would be kind of an off and on taste and smell, but it would fade away, and by Saturday night I wouldn't be able to taste or smell at all. Sorry about that. I had to pause to there was some kind of weird noise, and I wanted to close my window and change my shirt because I was getting too hot. But anyway, so yeah, just left off. I was in a pretty rough place on day 4. I guess the silver lining is that was definitely the worst day. But yeah, I was just talking about my taste and smell leaving. Kind of throughout the weekend, honestly, day 4 and day 5, the taste and smell was like coming in and out, but mostly going away. It would eventually get to the point where it was basically, completely gone. I think that would be by Sunday for sure. So let's talk about day 5. So let's see, day 5, the body aches were still very real at this point. That was pretty consistent through, I don't know, these first several days. Let's see, body aches, and again, like I said, the highest fever, I think I already said this, but day 4 it did get up to like 102, I believe. Day 5 the fever was back down to 101 even without medication. With medication I could get it down to 99, but I quickly decided not to take medication because I noticed every time I would take the medication, my heart would race. I forget if it was acetaminophen or Tylenol. I forget what it was because I don't usually take those for this reason, among others. But yeah, I noticed that my fever would go down, but the body aches would still be there. So that really didn't help me feel any better at all. And then it actually made me feel worse because my heart would be racing, which kind of causes anxiety. Like it's difficult to explain. But anyway, so yeah, with medication 99, without medication 101. But again, like I said, the body aches were much more extreme than what I would typically feel at a fever of 101. So kind of interesting. And then there were times as well where I almost felt slightly emotional or delusional. Not really. It it's like, I don't know. It's like I had certain symptoms of a high fever, even though I did not actually have a high fever. So I don't know what that's all about. But day 5, I would take myself to the grocery store, and you're probably saying, "No, why would you? Why would you do that? Don't you know? You know." At this point, I didn't know I had COVID. Well, I mean, I guess I was figuring it out at this point because I lost my taste and smell, and that's a pretty clear sign. Before we talk about the grocery store, let's talk about the taste and smell a little bit. So it was like every time I ate something, I felt like I was trying it for the first time because I didn't know, oh, what's this food going to be like now that I can't really taste or smell it all. The other thing, too, that I thought was really interesting is typically I lose my appetite when I experience, flu-like symptoms, fever, body aches, etc., etc. Usually there's a loss of appetite. There definitely was during my May 2022 episode. But this one, the entire time I've had my appetite, I've been eating regularly. So I think that, made it even weirder to not have my taste or smell at all. At first, it was really unsettling and really unpleasant. I really wanted that taste back, especially the smell I didn't really care about. But it was really sad, though. Like, I smelled my favorite cologne just to kind of test my smell. I got absolutely nothing there. And honestly, I wasn't too sad about that. But I went to smell my cat, got absolutely nothing. That was pretty sad. I was, and I was also reading stories online about people who wouldn't get their taste and smell back for weeks, sometimes months. Certain people said that it was years ago and they never got their taste and their smell back. So I was freaking out going, I might never get the taste and smell back. And so that was very unsettling. Fortunately for me, the loss of my taste and smell would only last a few days. Thank God. Thank you. Thank whatever. So anyway, so day 5, still really bad body aches, fever around 101 without medication. What else? The ear ringing was still loud at this point. I had pretty much just been sitting around watching TV. I was actually off today. I was scheduled off of work on day 5. I took myself to the store because I needed food. I do have 2 roommates, but one doesn't have a driver's license, and the other, he was already complaining about having to help other people too much right at the onset of this. So I figured I'm not gonna bother him. So anyway, so I went to the store. That was actually a really interesting experience. I felt like crap. I had the body aches, but I had some, tea. I got some caffeine in my system. Caffeine, honestly, is the one thing that makes me feel better than anything else when I'm sick and having body aches and everything else. So anyway, went to the store, and it was only when I went to the store that I realized my hearing was significantly gone. Like, I could barely hear anything out of my left ear. And I know that it had been that way throughout much of the weekend. So in other words, from day 4 into day 5. Just one moment. Had to let my cat out. They're constantly going in and out. But yeah, so I realized that I hadn't previously realized how bad my hearing was. I know that it was stable though, because it felt the same. I was still having the discharge coming out every 30 minutes, let's just say, between 20 and 40 minutes maybe. Including when I was sleeping. So that's really fun. I slept, always on my left side so that it would drain, and it would drain out at first it would drain out on the bed sheet before I got smarter and laid a towel there. But yeah, pretty nasty stuff, and it continued to just be this watery discharge. At this point, there was no pink hue in it at all. But yeah, it was only when I went to the store and drove to the store that I realized, okay, my hearing is actually really bad. I couldn't tell how loud I was talking. What else? And like I said, I really speculate that it had been that way for a couple days, but I was only just realizing it. I would say my hearing was like maybe at 5 or 10% in my left ear, and maybe like 15% in my right ear. Because my right ear was also, I also started experiencing ringing or tinnitus in my right ear as well as hearing loss in my right ear too. Okay, so that happened around this time, day 4 or day 5. Too. And what's interesting is before this whole COVID experience, I did not have any ringing in my right ear. But even now, to this day, although the tinnitus has improved, it will sometimes come in my right ear as well. It's consistent in my left ear every single day since July 17th. But in my right ear, it kind of comes and goes, okay? Oh, also what's interesting, at least to me, day 4, day 5, the ringing in my left ear would sometimes have multiple tones, which I've read is very rare. But yeah, there would be one consistent tone all the time, and then one other tone. I don't remember if it was higher or lower than the consistent tone. I don't know if that matters. But so that was wild. So at the worst of it, I would sometimes have both ears ringing with two different tones in one ear. So I could hear 3 different tones. Sometimes I actually wondered if it was 4 tones at the worst of it, but definitely multiple times in and out, 2 tones in one ear, 1 tone in the other ear. So that was pretty wild. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that has any significance at all. But anyway, so yeah, I went to the store, bought a lot of comfort food, wanted to keep my strength and all that. Went to the aisle with the candles. I smelled all the candles. What was interesting is most of them I got absolutely nothing. There was one though that I got a faint something. And what was interesting too is like many of these smells and tastes, I could almost feel them, but not actually taste or smell them. So for example, with many of the candles, like I could feel something. It was definitely a feeling. I could feel that there was a smell there, but I couldn't smell what it was at all. So very interesting, at least to me. So anyway, yeah, day 5 was probably the second to worst day. I think, my body aches weren't as sharply bad as day 4. I didn't have the pressure in my ear, but many of these symptoms just continued. Also, by this point, my sneezing and yawning or whatever that was had faded away. So in other words, like it pretty much started out with cold-like symptoms for the first few days. Then it moved on to flu-like symptoms. And then a pattern that we'll see later is that it kind of turns into cold-like symptoms toward the end as well. At least that's how I would put it. Day 6, I called out of work. More time just watching TV. I was gonna say I've never watched so much TV in my life, but I don't know if that's actually true. But yeah, day 6, I do think I started getting better around day 6 or day 7. I'm not sure which. I think it was day 6. I'm pretty sure day 6. I started feeling better. I noticed that my body aches have substantially improved. And it's very strange to me how dramatic this whole process was. Like, you very quickly get sick, or at least I did. And then again, like, it was like a switch went off, and then suddenly, that Monday, day 6, my body aches weren't as bad. They were still there, but not as bad. Still definitely wanted to call out of work. And I did. But yeah, and I still didn't have the cough at this point. There was no coughing up to this point at all. I even thought to myself, I've had so many cold and flu symptoms at this point, but no coughing whatsoever. And at some point I did have a online doctor visit. I think that was on maybe Sunday night. I'm pretty sure that was Sunday night, so the night of day 5. He prescribed me with a steroid and an antibiotic, which from what I understand, that's pretty standard with COVID. He was a great doctor. I would totally go through him again. He actually had COVID himself as well. He looked like he was in worse shape than I did, than I was. In a way, like I kept joking that I was dying throughout all this. I felt awful. Losing my taste, smell, and hearing was very distressing. That was probably the worst part. And then also just the body aches. But in a way, I've had worse flus or whatever you want to call them. I've had worse episodes than this. So depending on how I look at it, yeah, it was really bad. But in certain ways, it also kind of wasn't. So anyway, so day 6 is when I picked up my 2 prescriptions because I went very late. I had this doctor visit at like midnight of day 5 going into day 6. So morning of day 6, go to the pharmacy. My hearing was so bad. I remember telling the pharmacist, I'm sorry, like, I think I have COVID. I had also ordered COVID tests, I think on maybe Sunday or Saturday, day 4 or day 5. They wouldn't get to me for a few days though. So I hadn't yet tested at this point, but I figured without a doubt I probably had COVID. I even told the pharmacist that, like, I'm sorry, but what else am I going to do? No one's going to like pick up the prescription for me. And she said, don't worry about it. But anyway, so picked those up. I think I took my first round that morning. And at first, I would take the 2 steroid pills each morning because the directions just said to take 2 every day. They didn't specify, do I space them out? Should I take them in the morning or the evening? Didn't really specify any of that. So I took 2 that morning and the antibiotic. And for both the steroid and the antibiotic, I had 5 days worth. So I would take them for the next 5 days, day 6 through 10, Monday through Friday. It just happened to be Monday through Friday. Yes. And so I don't know. So I guess maybe that's why I started feeling better, because that would be the day that I started feeling better. What else? So yeah, still have body aches. Not really sneezing at this point, but still the body aches and the low-grade fever. But body aches were improving. Day 7, and I'm not going to give as much detail as we go into these later days. It will get a little quicker, I promise. I know this is super long. I know no one's going to listen to this. This is mostly for me more than it is anybody else. But day 7, I was actually scheduled off of work, so it didn't work. Sat on the couch watching TV all day. At this point, I got really excited because the body aches, again, they improved substantially. So day 6 and day 7, I improved dramatically. My hearing was still very bad at this point. It's hard to estimate, really, because I mostly just noticed it if I had to leave the house, like when I went to the grocery store and the pharmacy. Staying at home, I honestly didn't really notice it. I could watch TV. I knew that the hearing was bad after going to the store. I knew it was bad. If someone was sitting to the left of me talking, I couldn't really hear them at all. But yeah, at the same time, I could kind of get on, like, it didn't really bother me when I was at home, basically. Because I wasn't doing anything other than watching TV. Okay, and then I think that's pretty much it. I think I still had the discharge coming out of my ear at this point too, so it was still regular. I think it was lightening up though. It wasn't coming as often on Tuesday, day 7. So larger intervals. And I believe that night I wouldn't really have that discharge nearly as much. Okay. All right, day 8, I went back to work. I was starting to stress out because I need money. I need to go to work. I was adding up, I was doing the math and calculating how much this had cost me. It was hundreds of dollars at this point between the lost wages and then the medication. Plus, I bought some like other, like over-the-counter medication, and I forget what else I bought. Like, I don't know. But even just that alone was hundreds of dollars at this point, and I didn't have any more like PPTO, it's called. I didn't have any more coverage for my work hours, so I was like, I need to get my ass at work. I also did feel much better at this point. I wasn't sneezing. I don't think I was even coughing at this point yet. The body aches were pretty much gone at this point. I was so excited because they had gone away so dramatically in only a few days. I was like, wow, I can move around. I think the taste and the smell came back at this point too. So, like I said, it was only about like 3, maybe 4 days where I didn't have my taste or smell. So those came back pretty strongly. I was so excited about that too. Everything tasted so good. I was so excited. And I was very pleased and still am pleased that the taste and smell would stay consistent. They didn't like come in and out or anything like that at all. They were there to stay after that, so that was pretty exciting. What else? And the hearing though was still pretty rough. I had to work those first few days. Day 8, for example, was very strange. I was adapting, learning to work, not hearing hardly, my hearing was dramatically less. I do know I work with two people who are hard of hearing though. So I thought of them a lot, and I know that they're out there hustling, they're out there working. One of them in particular, at least one of them, I think has worse hearing even than what I did then. So I thought of that person a lot, and that kind of helped me get through, to know that, hey, as bad as this is, someone else has it worse, so, and they're still doing it. Okay, worked worked a full day, day 8. um, Day 9 would be the day where I finally get the COVID tests in the mail. So I took the test actually right before work. It tested positive. Whoa, shocker. And I would take my ass to work. Judge me if you want, but I needed money. I was stressed out. I couldn't just. Anyway, so I went to work and I asked management, hey, can you excuse some of these days off that I had, if I have a positive COVID test. I had taken pictures of it, taken pictures with my ID, took pictures of the envelope basically to show that this is legit. It's not just some random picture I found online. So I showed HR the picture of the positive COVID test. I really didn't think this through. But in a way, I'm glad that this happened the way it did. So I showed her the test. She said, okay, yeah, we can definitely excuse, those days. By the way, like, what day is that test from? Oh, it's from today. And she said, okay, well, sweetie, like, you need to go home. Like, and I don't know what I expected. Did I expect her to send me back to work? Of course not. Like, I hadn't really thought it through. So she said, yeah, you need to go home. And she was leaving, so she kind of cut that whole conversation short and was like, yeah, we'll talk about it later. Because I had a lot of questions at that point, but I wasn't able to ask them. So I went home early that day. So by this point, I had gone home early 3 days from work and missed 2 days. And then also had 2 days that were scheduled off, which was pretty convenient. So anyway, so I was very stressed at this point. I was actually very stressed through a lot of this whole experience. And I think that maybe made me worse, may have affected my health. But yeah, I was very stressed through all of this. When she sent me home, I was very stressed because I didn't know, because she had mentioned, the COVID, I'm spacing what it's called, the CDC. The CDC has, like, they say, what is it, like 5 days you have to stay home or something like that, or I don't know what it is now, but she gave me that number and I was thinking, no, I can't afford to miss that many more days than I already have. Like, I need to be here. So anyway, I went home very stressed, extremely stressed. At that time, my roommate he wanted to test for COVID as well. He tested negative, which I think is interesting because he was off of work that previous week as well. He sat by me on the couch watching TV that entire time, but he didn't catch it. So I think that's kind of interesting, but whatever. So yeah, and then, so the next day I got a hold of HR. She told me that, she told me stay home today. So this is day 10 at this point. Stay home that day. I was scheduled off for day 11. So she said, and I told her I hadn't had a fever since like probably Monday, which was day 6. So she said, just stay home today. I was scheduled off the next day. And then she said, we'll see you Sunday, which was like 2 days away at that point. And at this point, I felt great. This was, like I said, like throughout the 5 days that I was taking the antibiotic and particularly the steroid, I felt great. For those 5 days, I actually felt better than great. I felt better than ever. All my symptoms went away. And that's, I haven't had a lot of experience taking steroids, but they work by suppressing the immune system from what I understand. So I wasn't surprised that my symptoms were so much better. I was curious whether the symptoms would come back or not once I stopped taking the steroid. Because like I said, at this point we're on day 10. This is the last day where I had the antibiotic and the steroid. I don't know why I keep forgetting, but yeah. So, and I had noticed that I would take 2 two steroid pills each morning, and I would feel kind of normal throughout the day. But for some reason, in the evening, right around like, I don't know, 8, 9 p.m., I would get what I can only describe as a high, basically. And this definitely was happening on day 8 when I worked that full shift. Um, and it happened definitely day 9, day 10. But I would experience this high, and I've read that this can happen with steroids. It has to do with, it's like with cortisol, it's like a stress hormone or something. I don't know. I don't fully understand it, but I guess it's a thing. But yeah, and I'm not really sure why I would take it in the morning, but it wasn't until evening that I would have these like spiritual experiences, which was also strange because, like I said, I typically get this type of thing when I have a fever, but at this point I didn't have a fever, so this was different, I guess. But I was having all these like revelations and realizations, and I really started to look at life differently. To this day, over the last few weeks, I still look at life very differently. And I won't go into detail about that because it does get very personal. But I really started viewing everything much differently. Certain parts of my life, I had more of a desire to take accountability for, in a new way that I hadn't even considered before. What else? Also just I don't want to go into more detail than that, but it was very profound, very extreme. And although it was, I also became much more talkative. I was super outgoing. Like even that day on day 8, I was really talking to everyone around me on a deeper level than what I would typically do. I was really opening up with my coworkers. Like usually I'm a little bit shy and reserved, but I definitely was not that time. I was talking to everybody. So yeah, there were these ups and downs, like a lot of stress, but also like high on life or on the steroid or whatever it is. What else? I think that pretty much sums it up. So yeah, stayed home day 11 as well. I was scheduled off that day, so stayed home, watched TV. But at this point, I was feeling much better. This was also the first day not taking the steroid as well as the antibiotic, but the steroid in particular, I wasn't taking anymore. What was interesting though is like this burst of energy and this like new view on life and all of that was in a way it was very much there to stay. Oh, also the last few days I did start taking one steroid pill in the morning and one in the evening to try to like make it more stable, maybe reduce some of that like high that I was feeling, because specifically on day 8 it was almost embarrassing. I was like so talkative, so like such a free spirit. I didn't want anyone to think anything weird. I don't know. So although it was a lot of fun, I was almost like manic, like I was talking so much, and so in a way it was kind of dysfunctional. So anyway, so I did kind of take one in the morning, one in the evening. I do think that helped minimize that whole experience to some degree. It wasn't as intense, but again, I still had this like new perspective on life, this inspiration. I felt so motivated. Part of this I think just happens when you're sick. Like when you're sick, it kind of humbles you, right? You can't do all these things that you typically take for granted, just like, I don't know, just in general. So I started just really valuing like my work, my YouTube channel, as well as like my day job. That's all I wanted to do. Like I had this new ambition, and the way I was seeing every part of my life was very different. So that was there to stay. And also there was this energy that I still have now, that came out of this time. All right. And then this is where I'm going to stop going day by day by day, because it becomes less nuanced at this point. Day 12, it was a Sunday, and that was the day where I went to work. I worked day 12, 13, 14, 15. Somewhere in those days is where this cough developed, okay? So by this point, I had zero symptoms whatsoever other than this cough. Oh, also the ear drainage did go away. I believe day 8 was that first full day that I worked, and that was where I still had a little bit of drainage, but not much. And I think by day 9, it had gone away, and it was never to return, okay? So anyway, so day 12 through 15, let's just say my hearing was still pretty bad. It was still very rough. And with the hearing, it's kind of difficult to tell exactly, like, I like earlier I gave a percentage of from what it was compared to my normal hearing, but it's difficult to say, is that accurate? Like it's kind of hard to say. But I do know it was very bad, definitely less than half of what I could typically hear, without a doubt. So still awkward, and I could get by without anyone noticing though. I do work, a customer service job. I could get by without people noticing that my hearing was so bad. But yeah, especially if anyone was to the left of me, and if anyone kind of mumbled at all. Before that, I could still hear you, but if you're talking lowly and you're on my left, I'm not gonna hear shit basically. So that continued through day 12 through 15. But other than that, so other than the reduced hearing and the cough that was now developing, I had little to no symptoms, and at this point, the ear ringing was very loud as well. That was part of the hearing loss, especially in my left ear, but also to some degree in the right. Yeah, loud ear ringing. But like, how do I put this? Like, to measure how severe it was bad enough that I was very concerned. I was very stressed, especially because I didn't know how to see a doctor. Well, I guess that's not true because I did go online and it was only $39, so I could handle that. But I wasn't sure, like, should I see the doctor again? Like, I don't know how seriously he took the whole ear thing. I didn't go into a lot of detail about it. I did mention it, but he said, "Oh, that can happen with COVID, so don't worry about it." But I hadn't told him that I had been experiencing the tinnitus for months at that point, so it wasn't just because of COVID. It was exacerbated by the COVID, but anyway, so I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know how to fix it. I was very stressed at that time for multiple reasons, which I won't even go into. But not even just the sickness, but there are other major things going on in my life. Certain anniversaries that are very heavy for me to deal with at this time as well, and other things. I'm not going to go into like my stresses of life beyond the sickness. So anyway, so I was wondering, over time, I would gradually make this connection between my blood pressure would get really high at work sometimes, and I was becoming aware of this. I would sometimes have these little nicotine pouches, and I would also have caffeine. I would have diet soda a lot, and I think the combination of the nicotine with the caffeine with working a lot, I work hard. So I'm moving around, and then plus I am kind of shy. I'm kind of nervous. So in certain situations with working with people, the combination of all four of those variables, I think I realized was sometimes driving my blood pressure very high. And during these episodes where I'd have very high blood pressure at work, I had this one day in particular where the tinnitus got way worse. Like, I could hear it so loudly at work. Usually I can't really hear it because it's loud at work, but that day I could feel myself getting more stressed. I could feel my blood pumping, my heart pumping, and I could, I felt a pressure building as well. I don't know what day that was, but, it was one of these days after. It had to be somewhere between day 12 and day 21 for sure. Let's say between 12 and I think it was around day 18 or 19, but it's hard for me to say. So up to that point I hadn't known what to do, but once I connected the thing with the blood pressure, as soon as I made that connection, I said, okay, no more nicotine, no more caffeine. I have had a little bit of caffeine since then, but it's been few and far between. It's been like, 1 cup of green tea when I felt like I really needed some caffeine. Nothing beyond that. So like no coffee. I also cut out diet soda because I've researched diet soda a lot, specifically aspartame. I have researched it a lot, and I previously thought it was safe, but I did find somewhere in the interwebs that there could be a link between tinnitus and aspartame. So as soon as I discovered that, and this all happened around the same time. So there was one day where I decided, okay, no more aspartame, no more caffeine. But like I said, I've done a little bit of caffeine, and then no more nicotine either. It doesn't make sense to be doing these like stimulants when you're trying to have a lower blood pressure, right? Um, what else? Yeah, pretty much just that. And although the ear ringing was bad and my hearing was bad at that point, just knowing that I had some kind of plan that, hey, this is worth trying. Let's cut out these substances. That kind of gave me peace. And that's kind of a theme that I've read about as well, is that like it's very much a mental thing with the tinnitus. The more you focus on it, the worse it's going to get. You have to learn to live with it and just kind of accept it. And, people even have like white noise constantly sometimes, and that will help to minimize it. That can actually help it. Not only does it distract you from it, but it will literally help it over time. So I do think mentality is very important with that whole issue. So going forward after that day where I made those realizations, those connections, and those lifestyle changes, it was still just as bad at that time, but my whole perspective on it had completely changed. And as a result, it didn't bother me as much. I thought, hey, let's just give this a try for, I pretty much thought, it doesn't make sense for me to have caffeine or aspartame until this thing is gone. And as for nicotine or caffeine, I shouldn't have until this thing is gone. And as for aspartame, I haven't had any at all that I'm aware of. I've completely cut it out. No more. I had these packets at home that I'd use. No more of those. I threw them out. No more diet soda. I don't really eat candy for the most part. No diet candy or anything like that. And at first it was hard to tell, but over those following days, over the past week or week and a half at the time of my making this, at first it was hard to tell if it was improving or not. But what I can see looking back is that it was very gradually improving. But this was taking like days and weeks rather than, I wouldn't notice it within a particular day, if that makes sense. But gradually the hearing was returning and the cough was getting worse. The cough, I definitely, let's say like the week of day 12 through 18, the cough was getting worse. It's always been the same, at least within this whole COVID episode, it's always been the same unproductive, dry cough. Nothing is really coming out. I haven't really been very congested. Oh, that is another thing too, that as this cough got worse, I did get kind of a runny nose again. So I had a runny nose at the beginning with the sneezing, and then now no sneezing, but a runny nose with a cough. Okay. And I'm not sure when the coughing kind of peaked. I think it was actually very recently. So let's talk about November now. So November 1st would be day 21. So 3 weeks. And right around that time, I think, was when my coughing kind of peaked. Day 21, day 22. So in other words, that was like 2 or 3 days ago. Pretty recent. Yeah, it's been a very annoying cough. What else? But also around that time, I think day 20 or 21 maybe, my ears started popping. It could have been day 22, I'm not really sure, but somewhere, in the last several days, my ears started popping, and sometimes it did kind of hurt to some degree, but I was still excited about it. I had a good feeling about it. I felt like something was shifting. Maybe it could improve, even though it hurt a little bit. I thought maybe that's a sign that it's improving. And lo and behold, since then, I'm very excited that I have noticed a slightly more rapid improvement the last few days. And at this point now, really within the last 2 to 3 days, so in other words, day 22 through 25, or 23 through 25. I forgot today's 26. So let's just say day 22 through day 26. I came to the point where my ear is no longer popping the last couple of days. It actually just slightly popped. So maybe it is slightly, but not a lot. But yeah, the last few days, I've really become aware of how the ringing is gradually going down. Very gradually. I had this moment that I was really excited about where throughout this whole experience, there was this song that would play at work that I really liked. It played before this whole COVID experience, but I couldn't catch. Usually I'm very like neurotic about, I need to hear the lyrics so I can look it up, so I can like collect it and, put it in a playlist on YouTube or something. But but I couldn't hear the words to this particular song. It just I couldn't hear enough to find it, and I heard it multiple times, through this whole COVID experience, where my hearing was so bad that I could barely even hear the music when the hearing was the worst. But I could tell it was that song, but there was no chance in hell that I could hear any words at all. But as my hearing was improving, it was only a few days ago. So again, maybe like day 22 or something, or 21. I think it was day 22. But anyway, so the song came on and I went over to the speaker, like under the speaker, trying to hear it. And I was able to hear enough of the words to find the song. And so anyway, so I had this whole kind of emotional moment with that song, because yeah, it was pretty cool that I found this nice song and I really liked the song, but to me it's more meaningful than that. It really symbolized, I couldn't have done that if my hearing hadn't improved. So I was just so excited to be able to hear that song and to be able to hear in general. So at this point, the ringing is still there. It's there right now, but it's quiet enough that it's pretty much the way it was before this whole COVID experience. So I don't know whether it will continue or not. Honestly, it's low enough that I can live with it at this point. If it continues, I've read so many stories online about people who say the ring's there forever. There's nothing you can do about it. Some people have had ringing in their ears for 20, 30 years, and if that's what happens to me, I can live with that. It doesn't affect my quality of life. It's always there and I can definitely hear it. I actually have a quieter ringing in my right ear right now as well as I'm talking, but honestly, like I can hear it now because I'm noticing it, and it is always there, but I just don't usually notice it because I'm usually focused on whatever I'm doing. If I'm talking to someone, if I'm working now, being cognizant of the ringing when I'm at work, like I said, my workplace is loud, and at this point the ringing's quiet enough that it's hard for me to even hear when I'm at work. It's that quiet. So I'm very pleased about that. Like I said, I am hopeful that it will continue to subside and completely go away. I would love to hear just absolute silence because, like I said, I haven't heard that since early July. Or mid-July. I haven't heard that silence. So I would love to hear that. But on the other hand, I can live with the way it is now. My quality of life won't be hurt severely, and my hearing has improved as well, along with the loss of the tinnitus or the relative loss of it. Now, yeah, I can hear much better. Even if you're on my left side, it doesn't matter as much. My hearing might be slightly affected, but again, it's hard to kind of tell. It really isn't significant at this point. And my coughing is still bad as well. It's still uncontrollable. You've seen it throughout this whole video. But I do think the coughing is very slightly improving as well. So that wraps up my whole story. I didn't think this would take so long. But yeah, so that's my story. So I don't know who you are or why you're watching this. Maybe this will help you in some kind of way, but that's my experience. Oh, as far as like the emotional, like spiritual stuff, I still view life very differently. I have a lot of energy. I'm much more talkative at work. I'm much more energetic at work. I'm much more independent now. I'm much more motivated and ambitious. I have this consistent ambition that I did not have before this whole experience. And this whole thing is not unique to me. This tends to happen for me during eclipse seasons, as well as when I get sick with flu-like symptoms and have a fever. So, I tend to have these realizations and this newfound zest for life afterwards. So I don't know if that just sounds totally crazy. I don't know if anyone else can relate at all, but that's been my experience. So yeah, I'm feeling great now. Still have certain symptoms, but I'm okay. I'm great. Okay, that's my experience, and have a great day. I don't know.